Hello and good morning, afternoon, evening to all of you. My name is Omar, and I am the Deputy Secretary General at IALA, as well as the Dean of the Worldwide Academy. I welcome you to this second part of this second webinar in the IALA series of webinars on topics of interest to IALA members and everyone involved in AtoN navigation. Today's seminar has been split into two parts to accommodate the different time zones of the world. We had three presentations in total, and two of them have been delivered in the first part, which was held in the early hours of the European time zone, which is late afternoon in Asia, Australia, and Pacific. And this second part is held at a time which is more suitable for Americas. I want to remind you to keep your cameras off and your microphones muted during the presentation to conserve bandwidth and so that we can hear what the presenter has to say without interruption. During the presentation, I would like to ask you to write your questions in the chat box, and we will attend to these in the question and answer session after the presentation. During the question and answer session itself, you can raise your virtual hand in the system and require the floor if you want to say something. Similar to the previous part of this webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the IALA YouTube channel for everyone to see. The theme of this webinar as a whole is, of course, the COVID-19 epidemic, and in particular how our members have been able to cope with the situation with limitations on the movement of workforce and considerable challenges in the supply chain. While the first two presentations addressed the challenges facing our industrial members who provide services and make AtoN navigation equipment, as well as the challenges facing VTS authorities. This session will address the challenges facing our national members who have the obligation to deliver their AtoN navigation services no matter what, as far as practicable. Today we will have Mr. David Leewald, who is Navigation Systems and AtoN Navigation Specialist for the US Coast Guard. And not today, but this session now, we will have one presentation. And Dave will present on the impact of COVID-19 to the US Coast Guard AtoN Navigation program and how they deal with that. So Dave, could you please take the floor?
Thank you, Omar, and greetings and hello to all. Thank you for joining. I have a brief presentation that I would like to give. I'm going to bring it up on the screen now for you. Okay. So as Omar had indicated, today I just want to have a brief discussion regarding the impacts of COVID to our AtoN navigation and service delivery. And so what I propose is to show you a few of the slides and metrics that we use in the early days, and we are still monitoring. I will say that we are having an additional difficulty in the U.S. This hurricane season. We've had a number, and almost a record number of storms. So a lot of our reporting and our numbers will be also a little bit skewed by our efforts to recover from those storms. So when you see our metrics, you'll see that I intentionally stopped them before the hurricane season really got going. So we will, after a fashion, after we can clean up our data, so to speak, we will be able to see how we were doing in spite of all the hurricanes. So in the early days of the storm, so to speak, our first impact felt, it was in March, with two of our major AtoN navigation teams, which were located in New York and Seattle. We had several crew members test positive. In hindsight, it is no surprise that we had this initial, both in New York and Seattle, as they are both major points of entry, both sea and air entry into the U.S. So again, really no surprise there, but we were able to get these units back up and fully mission capable within a few weeks. Early on, Coast Guard leadership took very quick and swift action, installed some guidelines to field commanders to limit exposure. Most of the guidelines did come from, health organizations, and I feel that the Coast Guard in some areas actually exceeded a lot of those baseline recommendations. And today we're going to, like I said, we're going to take a look at how we did. So we bring the next slide here. This is a complicated and busy slide, I acknowledge, but what we're trying to show here is by our different types of ACE navigation units, what the impacts were and how many cases we saw of COVID on our crews. The class of vessels that you see on the bottom, these are a WLB represents a seagoing buoy tender, whereas a WLR, second from the bottom, is our inland river tenders. These are much smaller crews, and as you can see, they were impacted with the number of cases. We had the highest number of cases aboard our WLRs. From the case counts, the day of case starts, you can see that the heaviest time that we had cases was really in that July timeframe, and we were fairly fortunate that the counts were very low and the units were able to stay functional. Go to the next slide here. Okay. Again, another very busy slide, but in this slide, what we're looking at is the number of visits to our aids, to our AtoNs, how well we were servicing them, and we based it against the prior year. So you can see that in each one of our Coast Guard districts, our regional offices, we pretty much saw an overall reduction in the number of aids serviced between the calendar year 20 and the calendar year 19. And off to the right, you can kind of also see another comparison by month of how and what the impacts were. This is a sample slide that we were looking at. We were having produced every day and presented to Coast Guard leadership. The districts, as I said, there are regions. So the first district, D1, is our Northeast district, and again, this was an area that was heavily impacted in the early days of COVID, whereas D14 is our based in Honolulu, Hawaii, and very, somewhat isolated. So again, kind of understand that what those districts are about. Alaska is D17, and again, very much like I said about Hawaii, it's very it's naturally isolated. There's not a lot of one-on-one contact in Alaska. So again, you can see just how much by geography what the impacts were. Again, Northeast and in the southern states in D8. We were trying to look at AtoN visits as an indicator of performance and what the impacts in seeing if there was a link to COVID. I think that it's pretty obvious that we did see a reduction based on COVID. What we did learn is on this slide, this is another example from our daily and weekly reviews where we were looking at and tracking the hours dedicated to training and operations. And what we found is that our units, although they were not able to do as much work, visiting agents and navigation, they did occupy themselves very effectively and conducted training. So on the left, you'll see that the slight drop in March when we first kind of were isolating people, and then between March and mid-April, early April, you see a big spike in training. And if you look to the right, you'll see under percent time underway, you'll see that at that same time we had a drop in underway hours. So you can kind of, when one does the other, I'm just really proud of our units to take the initiative to, with the downtime to catch up and do a lot of training. I thought that was, I shouldn't be surprised there. We have fantastic people out there, but it's just nice to see it backed up with numbers. We did have a conversation yesterday talking about our in-house training, our schoolhouse. We have what we titled our National Ace and Navigation Training Center in Virginia, and it is having a problem meeting and getting people into the courses. To go to the class right now, any class, let's say it's a week-long class, you have to isolate for 2 weeks prior to going to the course, and then 2 weeks after. So what was 1 week of missing a person from the unit is now turned into 5 weeks, and some of our smaller units just can't absorb that loss. So we're, in terms of in-person training, we've had a lot of impacts to COVID, and we're still working our way through that. Okay, here's another slide of basically what I was talking about with how it impacts. You'll see down at the bottom, our office, we basically have remained ready to go and operational throughout all of this. We really, again, we've had a very low positive test rate within our community as opposed to other communities within the U.S. Not nearly as high as some of the other areas and some of the other services. But again, this far left column, it talks about the personnel, and really this is where the COVID really is the biggest impact is on people, as you know. And again, we've been very successful. What we are starting to see in our people is burnout. We have a lot of our people remotely working, and in doing so, we're finding that they're working more hours. There's a lot of reason for that. Obviously, dedication is a chief among that, but it's also perhaps maybe even a feeling of guilt and needing to do more. But we are starting to see a pretty significant amount of what we've termed as burnout. There's also people who are forced to multitask because we had such a long down period where we weren't doing much, and we were trying to establish our abilities to work from home or remotely. And in these cases, we had a lot of dual meetings, and I think perhaps the most significant, most recent was with our committee meetings. Many of us were committee meetings and also working a full workday at home in our home office. This is different. Typically, when we all go to San German, we can isolate and we can concentrate on just the committee meeting and perhaps do some email catch-ups in the night, but or in the evenings. But with being around the clock and starting around the world and starting early or late, whatever it might be the case, we were having very long work days. So this was an impact that perhaps we would not have been able to forecast or predict. With that, I'm going to leave you with my kind of a final thought here. We're losing the remote working is causing a loss of synergy. We're not because we're not face to face. We're not having a coffee together or even maybe dinner. We're losing a lot of opportunities for brainstorming and innovative thinking. It's a little bit harder to do that. Right now I'm in my dining room, so it's not a great place for this kind of work. So my final thought is perhaps one of the most significant lingering effects of COVID-19 will be the loss of one-to-one mentoring, which occurs between senior and junior staff in an office environment. AtoN knowledge has been described as tribal in nature, with traditions and gained knowledge passed down and freely exchanged between professionals. Let us hope that this will not include the Ayala tribe, and we can once again gather in person in San German-en-Laye. So with that concludes my presentation, and I look forward to any questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Dave. I haven't seen any questions posed on the chat, but everybody, please feel free to pose any questions and wave your hand if you want to take the floor. Thank you for an excellent presentation, Dave, and titled discussion on COVID-19, and hopefully we will be able to have a discussion with some of the participants if they would want to raise their voice. But you mentioned a few quite interesting facts and numbers. One of them being that Alaska actually worked harder and did % more visits than normally. Quite interesting, actually. I don't know if you have any explanation. I mean, they didn't catch any virus, but not a lot, but then they were more productive than anybody else in the Coast Guard. How come?
Well, because it is Alaska, and the bulk of the work does occur in the summer times up there, just average, any given year. So, and then the fact that our units are so remotely located up there. I've served several times in Alaska, and Homer, Alaska, home port to one of our buoy tenders is it's 3,000 people. It is connected by highway, but it's the next town is 4 hours away. The next large town. So there's just not a lot of interaction, and people are not close together. So even Alaska has had the lowest numbers in our states in terms of COVID in general. But again, our remote units. Cordova, Alaska, is completely isolated. The only way in or out is by plane or by boat. Sitka is an island. Kodiak is an island. But yes, the combination of low exposure and typically summer months is when we get all of our work done up there, anyways. So.
Okay. Yeah. So another part of what you said was that training had gone up and operations had gone down for obvious reasons. Operations. This is also what we see in our own universe in Ayala and in many places that people take the opportunity to do some training or education or try to qualify themselves, being confined to some extent, and recently to a large extent here in Europe, by the way. France has closed down completely now. And just for the information of everybody, the Ayala office is open for business still. We, even though France has closed down, we have been working remotely since March, actually, and keeping up all the work. But interestingly enough, I have seen your hand, Geraldine, by the way. You talked about burnout, and one of the earlier presentations today from Australia, from Sealight, had the same element of people not being able to manage completely how much they work. They would work more than they used to, and this would create stress. And so, have you done something? I know the United States Coast Guard is quite proactive in reacting to things that you discover. So have you put anything in place to manage this and to prevent further burnout?
That's a really good question, and I'll answer it in two fashions. One is, yes, we are doing things. From as simple as sending a weekly health wellness kind of message out to all hands, just to remind them to walk the dog every now and then. Take breaks. Take care of yourself. Do I think that we need to do more? Well, I think the answer is yes. We need, especially as we go into the winter months. It was easier to walk a dog on a beautiful summer day. It might not be so easy setting in. I will tell you from experience in Alaska, as I mentioned, is the XO or the CO of a ship. It's important that you find activities for people to do to occupy them, and we have a morale event, and it's a little bit more difficult nowadays to get everybody together for a morale event. But there are releases out there. Early on, a group of us within the U.S. federal government, we call ourselves the Navigation Visionaries, probably an inflated title, but we get together every Friday afternoon online like this and just chat and catch up. These are people that I normally see in functions like Ayala, and so that has been very helpful. But again, I think that as leaders, we need to look at more and find more innovative ways. And I hope that if we do this again, maybe 6 months, I hope I could have more success stories to give you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we most probably will, actually, in terms of Ayala. And you mentioned Ayala meetings as one of the sources of excessive work being done in the period of the committee session there. And yeah, I sincerely hope that we haven't done too much damage, but we certainly did a lot of work, I have to say, which was very good. So now I have a hand from Geraldine. Which hand is this, right or left?
Well, as a Belgian, I tend not to know the difference between right or left. So,
Right or wrong, you mean?
yeah. Thank you for the very good presentation, Dave. And I was considering the United States very high developed in terms of technology and all that kind of stuff. But I was curious from this exercise of being in with the pandemic, did you evaluate positive things in the processes that you would implement or keep in the future? For example, I could think that a developing country could use remote monitoring as a way to solve problems, not to work operational. But you already have all these systems established. Is there something new that you found out, like, oh, wow, we would never have considered that without being in a pandemic? Thank you.
Yes. So let me break that question down a little bit. So first, is what we've learned. What we have learned is that we can work independently and remotely. I would think that so far that's perhaps the biggest lesson learned. You talk about monitoring of AtoN. This couldn't have happened more timely because we are looking at monitored AtoN. We're starting to field some of those. I know as a program, we would feel more comfortable if we really knew the health of our aids to navigation. And I know that Sea Light was on this morning. They are a provider of monitored AtoN systems and services. So I think that really should be the next major step in the evolution of aids to navigation is the monitored AtoN. So that we're not having to guess what the status of our aids to navigation is, and we don't have to rely on a vessel going out and checking aids that may or may not be, fine. Let's face it. I mean, a lot of our service visits, we find nothing wrong with the AtoN. So I think COVID is bringing that to light, perhaps, or shining a light on that. But we have been moving in that direction to see what it can do for us. As far as what a developing country, I know that is, a principle in your mind. I think that well, I'll use this as an example. The U.S. laid a lot of telephone wire in the the 50s, 60s, 70s, and that major massive infrastructure, and we can say that is very much like our buoy systems, correct? Was quickly replaced, and all of a sudden it became cellular, and so all of that built-in infrastructure was basically, outdated, outmoded immediately, and in the U.S. we saw a lot of services that were able to capture and use these newer technologies. What we would have considered in the 80s as being emerging countries leapfrogged the U.S. in terms of infrastructure and technologies. So what does that mean? Well, we have caught up, I think, a little bit in the U.S. with our ability to, with our bandwidth, if you will, the internet bandwidth, and being able to hold these meetings like this. I think if you recall back in March, we saw that these meetings were not very productive, the people dropping off, the technology, so I never want to miss a learning opportunity. And so I would say to anybody that watch and learn, I think the idea behind this webinar is precisely that. Let's learn from this, and how can we apply those lessons in the future, COVID or no COVID. I mean, I hope I answered you. Okay,
yeah, thank you. I have to echo what you said. I've actually been quite surprised by the ability of the world internet infrastructure to handle all this. The whole world is online at the same time, basically, or in different time zones, yes. But the whole of Europe, the whole of the US or Americas, and it seems to be running smoothly. So it's quite impressive, actually. And I am surprised, actually, that it is so smooth. Now, Dave, I don't know what you've done, but you seem to be very, very popular by the Belgian population, and particularly the women in Belgium. There's another Belgian lady here, Aline de Bier, that has posed a question. You need to teach me a few tricks on this one. With the Belgian ladies. But the loss of synergy is a serious matter, she says, especially as it is feared that the pandemic will last well into 2021. Even if a vaccine were to materialize and could be distributed at large, all this will take time. So how to improve upon synergy and innovation basically under these circumstances? How can we do that? Do you have any thoughts on that, Dave?
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, just with several colleagues, we meet every Friday. We turn the cameras on so we can see facial expressions, and we do have a drink. It's a Friday afternoon, and we have a cocktail in hand, and so that is one way of synergy. It is not likely that the senior to junior relationship will happen in that fashion, or perhaps not socially, but maybe smaller in-office meetings like this to just chat and talk things through. But the human contact piece, the coffee breaks at Ayala, I'm afraid that they are irreplaceable. And yes, we might feel that we lose time 2020 and 2021 perhaps. But as soon as we all get back into a room again, I think that the synergy will be spontaneous and almost combustible, I think. But it's horrible, to be honest. And I miss being, obviously, like everybody, I miss being around fellow professionals and exchanging ideas.
Yep.
It's awful. I just leave
don't we all? Yeah. I have been also surprised myself by how efficient we actually have been in the Ayala community and in progressing work, and how well the meetings actually function, and how much energy there is. And I've attributed this actually to the familiarity within the group. So we know each other very well, which is one of the very important ingredients in the recipe of making things work, and trusting each other in this work, etc., etc. So that you interestingly used the word Ayala tribe or tribal. I haven't thought about that. So maybe we're not a family, but really a tribe. Belonging together worldwide. That's another way of seeing Ayala. So, is there anybody else from the tribe that has a question or a comment on this topic or these topics that we have? No, I see nothing.
I do see Andre Chateauver is online, and maybe I put him on the spot to say, is he, also being with North America, are you seeing similar trends in Canada?
Exactly. This is what we can do in the Ayala family tribe. We can put people on the spot. Andre, please open your microphone, and we want to see your face too.
Maybe you'll see me. I don't know. Something's wrong with my camera. It's dark. I don't know.
Okay. Well,
but you can
we'll
hear
settle
me
with
at
your
least?
voice. Yes, we hear you very well.
Hello, David. Thanks for the passing the puck, like we say in hockey term. We have similar issue here within the Canadian Coast Guard. I think our biggest problem was not the amount of COVID staff affected by the pandemic. We have a very few staff affected. But our biggest impact was the lack of it's related to travel, going to a site, going to a particular land base. Site was a problem for us, sending staff technicians to fix an aid could not be done because they could not travel together in the same truck, same car. So we had to send them separately. They had to work far from each other. So biggest impact was the servicing of aids. On floating vessels, it went very fine. No cases, so we got lucky. All the floating aids were serviced in accordance with the plan. So on that field, we were lucky. That's pretty much what I had to say, I think, for now.
Well, one question. I suspect that you have a lot of maintenance to do in the Arctic every summer. How has that worked this year?
It worked fine also because, like Alaska, very few cases. In fact, we had one cases for the whole Arctic, and it was not even a Coast Guard staff, so not a major issue. But the impact of the COVID situation in the Arctic was that we could not put in place new initiatives. It was just maintenance, not adding stuff, not upgrading the equipment or things like that. Just doing the minimal maintenance.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anything else? We still have a minute or two if need be. Anybody? No, I think that concludes then. Dave, thank you very much for your input, and indeed quite an interesting presentation with a lot of facts, which I'm sure that we will actually be looking back on this with great interest in the future. Many aspects of this COVID-19 statistics of what really transpired in many perspectives. It's going to be interesting, but hopefully we will get over the hill anytime soon and get back to the soiree on Tuesdays in the Ayala headquarters. So an announcement, well, I don't know if it's very relevant for you, but I want to mention that we have scheduled another webinar on the safety of navigation and the delivery of AtoN navigation in Africa. This is focused on the French-speaking countries, could be interesting for Canada then, and it will take place this coming Tuesday, the 3rd of November, around noonish European time. You can find more information on the Ayala website. And also in the future seminars, of course, or webinars taking place in this series will be published on the Ayala website and as news items and what have you in due time. We expect to conduct maybe one a month, or even if we have a huge interest, 2 a month of this type of events for the foreseeable future. So basically this seminar has, or I keep on saying seminar, I mean webinar has now come to an end. The video of this session will be made available on the Ayala YouTube channel within an hour or two. And you can find the links on the website if you need, and you will also find other Ayala webinar recordings either through the website or on the YouTube channel when you find that. So having said that, I thank you all. Thank you, participants. Thank you indeed, Dave, and the Ayala staff for helping out with making this webinar happening. The webinar is closed. Thank you very much, and goodbye. Yeah. Keep up the good work, and have a nice day.